Okay, I'm going to talk about once saved, always saved is a really large umbrella term, meaning I know Calvinists don't consider themselves once saved, always saved because of the connotations of it, the perseverance of the saints. But when I say once saved, always saved, I mean it like in this case, in this particular instance, as I teach you the truth. Um, I refer to this umbrella term and just in its basic concept, not as a theological term. So just as anybody who thinks a saved person can't lose their salvation, period. Okay, that stems from Charles Jennings to Arminians to Arminian Baptists who think you can't lose your salvation to Calvinists, high Calvinists, which I'm going to end with high Calvinism, destroying each version as I go, just utterly obliterating it in hopes to clear the air of false teaching. So the most egregious, and almost anybody and most Christians historically and currently will not accept would be Charles Jennings' version, which is honk for Jesus. Like you could be drunk on a hit because you're a hitman and you go to the club, sexually abuse some women, have about a fifth of tequila, jump in your car, or maybe you're in a taxi, it doesn't really matter. And in your drunken stupor, the car in front of you has a bumper sticker that says, "Real men love Jesus." And in your brief moment of vision, you see that bumper sticker as your eyes close and you close your eyes and everything's spinning and you puke all over yourself. You won't even remember this moment. You're so wasted as you're getting taken back to your hotel room where you'll sleep it off, get up, shoot your contract, because you're a hitman, okay, and then go home and do your thing, continue on. If you saw that bumper sticker and you thought, hey man, I don't want to die or go to hell, I'd like to live forever, that sounds like a good idea. So you give your inebriated honk for Jesus, okay? That man is going to heaven, even if he worships Satan, continues his job as a hitman, never gives a second thought about the gospel, and eats babies every morning. That man's going to heaven. And Charles Jennings will tell you, yes, if he assented to the supernatural fact that Jesus died for his sins for a millisecond, that man is saved, and nothing he does can undo that. And anything else is a false gospel because it's a free gift after all. Most people realize they cannot stand for that. That's retarded. Okay, at least he is consistent and he isn't wobbling like most everyone in between. There's that, and on the far end of the only reasonable or somewhat coherent version would be the high Calvinist version, which is 5 points of tulip all the way, baby. That makes sense. God determines everything if you are that guy, but you won't do this. They can even function as a normal historic Christian. The majority of normal historic Christians are how Christianity was supposed to be, as far as I can tell. That is, you are obliged to, as a duty, to serve God if you do love him, and obedience is part of faithfulness, naturally. By naturally, I mean it's an outward growth of that. It's a demonstration of that. That makes sense. But here's the problem. And then everything in between is just playing both sides of the fence. Okay? If you have free will, you can walk away from the faith. If you don't have free will, you can't. That's why it makes sense. The problem with that is the one that makes sense, the only one that truly makes sense, the Calvinist version, only makes sense because they're just full-bore determinists, which takes all meaning out of life and makes God seemingly evil. And at least in every intuitive way we can understand how we operate as humans and have a court of law and feel like we have responsibility and duties, and things are praiseworthy or blameworthy, and to different degrees. It defies that. So really, if you have free will, a true sense of free will, like the early church fathers all agreed you have, that is not determined free will, then to say you can't lose your salvation only makes sense if you are a Calvinist. But unfortunately for Calvinism, we have Exhibit A, Tyler Vela. He is actively against the gospel. He doesn't believe it. He says it's not true. And he used to believe that, and he was an apologist for it. And he was one all the true believers looked up to and applauded, as they should, because he was a believer and he preached the gospel. And guess what? 1 John 2 has no effect here. Why? Because an in context reading of those who were not of us are the historically understood and almost with no opposition. These are the Gnostics. What were the Gnostics? Well, amongst many things that were wrong, they thought the Old Testament God was a different God that was evil. Well, okay, so they had the spirit of lawlessness, the one the Antichrist has, the final Antichrist in anybody in history that can be considered an Antichrist. It was already at work. What? The spirit of lawlessness. Guess what? You can't use that verse against Tyler Vela because he was of us, because he didn't have the spirit of lawlessness, because he was a Calvinist. And so that you can abuse the text, go ahead. But the spirit of lawlessness that was already at work in the church does not apply. Not to mention, isn't it so easy to get saved, to be justified, that you repent and believe on Christ alone? He preached that. He was a believer. He was in a position in time, right with God, and there's in no sense can you say he's right with God right now. If he died right now and you say he's saved, then the gospel has no meaning in this world, and you just think God determines who's saved and who's not beforehand, and that's decided, nothing else matters, and the rest is a charade. But if you take the gospel seriously and why it actually has effect in the world, because it's a ministry to people in their lives through the trust in faith and justification by faith, then you have to, if you're honest, admit it. The man was saved and now he's not, which falsifies Calvinism, and any once saved, always saved. Hands down, undeniable, accept it, or you're a dishonest person. Facts. Don't care about your feelings or your church.